The blizzard came early that December, turning the streets of our quiet suburb into a white, swirling chaos. Snow piled against fences, drifted over sidewalks, and muffled every sound until the world felt wrapped in cotton. At 58, I had long stopped chasing sales across town. Instead, I shopped at the small grocery store 3 blocks from home, the one where the cashiers knew my name and asked about Vernon without me having to explain who he was. That afternoon, I stood in line at the checkout, clutching my faded canvas tote bag to my chest like a shield. The store smelled of wet cardboard, fresh bread, and the faint chemical tang of floor cleaner. Outside the wide windows, snow whipped sideways, sticking to the glass in thick, uneven patches. People hurried past, heads down, scarves pulled tight. Ahead of me stood an elderly woman, small and hunched, wrapped in a threadbare shawl the color of old tea. Her hands trembled as she emptied a worn leather wallet onto the counter. Coins scattered, pennies, nickels, a few quarters, rolling in tiny, uncertain circles before stopping. On the conveyor belt lay her purchases, 1 loaf of white bread still in its plastic wrapper, a half-gallon carton of milk, 3 large potatoes, and a single yellow onion, its papery skin cracked. The cashier, Candace, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes and a name, tag pinned slightly crooked, counted the total again. "Ma'am, you're short," she said gently, but with the weariness of someone who had already said it too many times that day. "About $1.17. The old woman frowned, her thin lips pursing. She pushed the coins around with one crooked finger. "I counted at home," she muttered. "I counted everything." Behind me, a man in a heavy parka sighed loudly, shifting his weight. The line had grown to 6 or 7 people now, all eager to escape the storm and get home before the roads became impossible. I watched the woman's hands, red and chapped from the cold, veins standing out like blue rivers under thin skin. Her shoulders curved inward, as though carrying an invisible weight. Something inside me twisted. How many times had I seen someone struggling and looked away? Pretended not to notice? Told myself it wasn't my place, wasn't my problem? Today, for reasons I still cannot fully explain, I stepped forward. "Candace," I said, sliding a $20 bill across the counter over the old woman's shoulder, "ring her things up with mine." The cashier blinked, surprised. The old woman turned slowly, her movements careful, almost fragile. "Oh, honey, no," she protested, voice thin and quavering. "I'll just put the onion back, or the milk. I don't need—" "Please," I said, offering the warmest smile I could manage. "It's nothing, really, not even worth mentioning." She stared at me for a long moment. Her eyes were not cloudy with age, not faded like so many older people's. They were sharp, deep blue, almost luminous. They looked straight into me, past the polite smile, past the years of routine and quiet resignation, straight into the tired corners of my heart. I felt suddenly exposed, as though she could see every unspoken loneliness, every small hurt I had swallowed over the decades. "Thank you, daughter," she whispered at last. Her voice trembled, but not with weakness, more with something like reverence. "Your kindness, it will not be forgotten. It will come back to you." I shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable under that gaze. "Just being neighborly," I murmured. She gathered her groceries into a plaid shopping bag that looked older than both of us combined. As I paid for my own items, chicken thighs for stew, carrots, celery, a bag of potatoes, bread, a few cans of soup for the days Vernon would be gone, I felt her watching me still. I had just lifted both bags when her hand shot out and caught my sleeve. Her grip was surprisingly strong, wiry fingers closing like a clamp. I froze. "Listen to me carefully." "Daughter," she whispered, leaning so close I could smell mothballs, dried lavender, and something older, earthier, like wet leaves after rain. Her breath brushed my cheek. "When your husband leaves tonight, do not touch the snow in the yard." I blinked. "What?" "No matter what he tells you," she continued. Each word slow and deliberate. "Do not shovel. Do not clear the driveway. Do not touch it until morning. Let the white lie untouched." My mouth opened, then closed again, confusion mixed with a flicker of unease. "Ma'am, Promise me." Her fingers tightened. "This is very important. Your life depends on it. Believe an old woman." Her eyes bored into mine. There was no trace of confusion or senility in them now, only urgency, certainty, almost command. I swallowed. "Okay," I said faintly.
"I promise."
"I won't shovel." She studied my face another long second, searching for sincerity. Then she nodded once, satisfied. Her hand released my sleeve. "Good," she breathed. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the exit, surprisingly quick and steady for someone so frail. The automatic doors hissed open. Snow swirled in behind her like white smoke. Then she was gone, swallowed by the storm. I stood there, bags heavy in my hands, heart beating too fast. The man behind me muttered something impatient. Candace gave me a small, awkward smile as she handed me my receipt. I forced a laugh, short, nervous, and walked out. The cold hit like a slap. Wind tore at my scarf, snow stung my cheeks. I hurried to the bus stop, head down, replaying her words. Do not touch the snow. Ridiculous. Vernon had grumbled that very morning over breakfast. The driveway's a mess. You need to clear it before I get back tonight. I don't want to get stuck turning around in the morning. I had nodded automatically. Of course I would shovel. I always did. And yet, that strange old woman's voice echoed in my head, stubborn and clear. I shook it off. She was lonely, probably confused. Poverty and solitude could twist the mind. I felt sorry for her, and a little foolish for letting her words linger. The bus ride home was crowded and damp. Wet coats, wet boots, the smell of wool and exhaust. I pressed my forehead to the cold window and watched snowflakes melt against the glass. Our house waited on the edge of town, solid brick built in the 70s, the one my parents had left me. Vernon and I had lived there nearly 30 years. I had planted the apple trees, revived the rose beds, painted the porch railing twice. It was home, the only real home I had ever known. When I stepped inside, the house was dark and cold. Vernon had left early for the depot to ready his rig. I turned up the thermostat, shook snow from my boots, hung my coat. The familiar routine steadied me. I unpacked groceries methodically, chicken into the fridge, vegetables into the bin, bread on the shelf. Every motion practiced, automatic. The kettle whistled. I made tea, then started dinner preparations. Vernon liked meatloaf for the road, something hearty that traveled well. I thawed the one I'd made last week, chopped vegetables for salad, boiled broth. At 6 o'clock sharp, the front door slammed. Vernon entered like a storm himself, boots dripping, jacket shedding snow onto the mat. Tall, broad, face carved by years of sun and wind and highway dust. 59, but still powerful. 25 years driving an 18-wheeler had left him hard, silent, remote. Everything ready? He asked, not looking at me, heading straight for the kitchen. Yes, Vern, almost packed. He sat heavily, poured tea, added 3 heaping spoons of sugar, stared at his phone. Thumbs moving fast. No eye contact. No, how was your day? No, thank you. I packed containers, soup, meatloaf slices, cornbread, salad, while stealing glances at his profile. When had the warmth disappeared? When had conversations become orders? Clean the snow tonight, he said without looking up. Driveway's buried. It'll drift worse tomorrow. It's almost dark, Vern. The blizzard. His eyes flicked to me, cold, flat. I said tonight. You're not a child. Half an hour, that's all. I pressed my lips together. The old woman's voice rose unbidden. Do not touch the snow. I pushed it down. When do you leave? I asked quietly. Hour or so. Load sealed. Papers signed. He drained his tea, stood, headed upstairs for his shower. I stayed in the kitchen, eating leftover soup alone. Outside, wind howled. Snow fell thicker than ever. I walked to the window. The yard was already a white sea, path gone, gate half buried. The single street lamp barely cut through the darkness. 40 minutes later, Vernon came down, road clothes, duffel bag over his shoulder. I handed him the food bag. Call when you get there? I asked, habit more than hope. Yeah, no goodbye kiss. Just a nod. Shovel the snow, he repeated at the door. Or you won't get out tomorrow. The door closed. His truck started, tires crunching, then faded. Silence rushed in. I sat at the table, hands around cold tea. Do not touch the snow. Fatigue settled like lead. My back ached. My legs trembled. The storm raged. Why fight it tonight? Everything would be covered again by morning anyway. I wouldn't shovel. I blamed the weather. Vernon was gone. He wouldn't know. Upstairs, I changed into my nightgown, robe, climbed into bed with a book I couldn't focus on. Thoughts circled back to the old woman, her eyes, her grip, her impossible warning. I dreamed of snow, endless white, footprints appearing, circling the house, a shadow at the window. I woke several times to wind rattling the panes. Morning came slowly, gray light creeping in. I rose, wrapped my robe tight, went downstairs, put the kettle on, walked to the kitchen window, and froze. The yard lay smooth, untouched, perfect white blanket, except for the footprints. Deep, deliberate, men's boots, size 12 or 13, heavy tread. Not Vernon's. They started at the gate, crossed the yard, circled the house. paused at every ground floor window. Living room, kitchen, pantry, basement entrance. Someone had come in the night. While I slept, alone. My breath caught, heart slammed against ribs. I stared, unable to move, as the kettle screamed behind me. The kettle's shriek pierced the silence like a warning I had ignored too long. I reached back blindly, snapped the burner off, but my eyes never left the window. The footprints stared back at me, dark, accusing gashes in the otherwise flawless snow. Each one was deep, deliberate. The tread of heavy boots pressed hard into the drift. Not Vernon's boots. I knew his soles the way I knew the creak of the third step on the stairs. These were larger, wider, stranger. My fingers gripped the windowsill until the wood groaned. Heartbeats hammered in my ears, loud enough to drown the settling house. Someone had walked here. In the night, while I slept upstairs, defenseless, alone, I forced myself to breathe, slow, through the mouth, fighting the rising panic that tasted like metal. Maybe it was nothing. A neighbor checking on me, a lost delivery driver, kids playing a prank. But the tracks didn't lie. They began at the gate, where the latch was still closed exactly as Vernon had left it. From there they cut straight across the yard, no hesitation, no wandering. They reached the front porch first, paused, two prints side by side, as though the man had stood still for several seconds, looking at the living room window. Then they moved again, hugging the side of the house. Circling to the kitchen window where I now stood, they stopped again, longer this time, then continued around the back, past the pantry door, past the basement entrance, before looping back the same way. They had come and vanishing through the gate, methodical, careful, professional almost. No broken glass, no forced lock, no footprints leading up the porch steps. Whoever it was hadn't tried to enter. He had only looked. The thought made my skin crawl. I backed away from the window as though the glass might suddenly shatter. My robe felt too thin, the house too big and hollow. Every familiar sound, the tick of the clock, the faint hiss of the baseboard heater, now seemed threatening. I needed to call someone. My fingers shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone while scrolling for Gareth Purnell's number. Officer Purnell had walked this beat since he was 20-something. Now in his early 50s, he still answered calls with the same calm patience he'd had when he was new. I had known him since he gave safety talks at the community center. If anyone would take me seriously, it was him. The line rang twice. Purnell. Gareth? It's Ilara Vance, Chestnut Street, number 17. I'm so sorry to call this early, but something strange happened last night. His voice stayed steady, professional, but kind. Good morning, Mrs. Vance. What's going on? Someone came to the house while Vernon was gone. There are footprints all around the yard, deep ones. They go right up to every downstairs window. I was alone. I'm scared. A short pause. I could almost hear him thinking, weighing the words. Did they break anything? Door? Window? Anything missing? No, nothing. The doors are still locked, windows latched. But the tracks, they're very clear. They circled the whole house. Another pause. All right, stay inside. Don't go out and don't walk anywhere near those prints. I want them preserved exactly as they are. Check every lock and window again, just to be sure. I'll be there in 20, maybe 30 minutes. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you so much. I hung up and immediately began moving through, the house like a stranger in my own skin. I tested every window latch, living room, dining room, kitchen, pantry. All secure. The front door was double locked, chain still on. The back door hadn't been touched. Even the old basement door, which we never used, was bolted from the inside. Nothing disturbed, and yet everything felt wrong. I returned to the kitchen, sat at the table, and stared at the cold cup of tea I had never finished making. My mind kept circling back to the old woman in the store. Do not touch the snow in the yard. If I had shoveled last night as Vernon ordered, these tracks would have been erased. By morning, the fresh fall would have smoothed everything over. I would have walked out, swept the porch, cleared the driveway, and never known anyone had been here. The realization settled like ice in my stomach. She had known. Somehow, impossibly, she had known. 25 minutes later, headlights cut through the gray dawn. A familiar cruiser rolled to a stop in front of the house. Officer Purnell stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered dark winter jacket zipped to the chin, breath fogging the air. He carried a flashlight, even though the sky was beginning to lighten. I met him at the door before he could knock. Mrs. Vance? He touched the brim of his hat. Let's take a look. We stepped onto the porch together. The cold burned my cheeks and lungs. The snow had stopped sometime in the early hours. Now the world was eerily still, every sound amplified. Purnell descended the steps slowly, boots crunching, eyes scanning. He stopped at the edge of the yard, squatted, studied the first print. Size 12, maybe 13, he murmured. Heavy tread, work boots or maybe tactical. Deep impression, man's weight, probably over 200 pounds. He rose and followed the trail without stepping in it, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who had done this many times before. Straight from the gate, he noted aloud. No hesitation. Knows exactly where he's going. He paused at the living room window, stood here, long enough for the snow to settle around his boots a little, then moved on. He traced the entire perimeter the same way. Kitchen, pantry, basement, back around to the gate. Confident, he said when he finished. Didn't run, didn't look over his shoulder, closed the gate behind him when he left. Polite almost. Polite? The word tasted bitter. Careful, he corrected. He didn't want to leave obvious damage. Wanted to be in and out without anyone knowing he was here. But why? My voice cracked. If he was going to rob us, why not break in? Why just look? Purnell's eyes met mine, serious, steady. Could be casing the place, checking layout, lights, routines, seeing if anyone's really home. Could be planning something for later. The words landed like stones. Or, he added quietly, he might have been looking for someone specific, confirming you were alone. My knees felt suddenly weak. Gareth, what do I do? First, we see if anyone caught him on camera. Mrs. Higgins across the street. She put up that security system. Last year, after the garage break-in. Let's ask. We crossed the snow-packed road together. Mrs. Higgins's house glowed. Warmly, porch light on, curtains pulled back. I rang the bell. She appeared almost immediately. Floral housecoat, gray hair in a neat bun, eyes widening when she saw the uniform. Ara? Officer Purnell? Oh dear, what's happened? Someone walked around my yard last night, I said. Left tracks everywhere. We're hoping your camera might have caught something. Lord have mercy. She pressed a hand to her chest. Come in, quick before you freeze. Inside smelled of cinnamon and coffee. She led us to the living room, where a flat-screen TV hung above an old console. Beneath it sat the DVR box, green and red lights blinking. My grandson set this up, she said, handing Purnell the remote with both hands. I can barely turn the television on, let alone rewind tapes. Purnell took it confidently. What time did Vernon leave, Mrs. Vance?
Around 7.
Maybe 7:15. He navigated the menu, rewound to 8 o'clock, set it to play at normal speed. Grainy black and white footage filled the screen. Snow fell thick and steady. The street looked empty, ghostly. Time crawled. Until 14 p.m., nothing. So 10 sec, nothing. 10:44, movement. A dark sedan rolled slowly into frame and stopped directly across from my gate. A tall figure stepped out, dark, bulky jacket, knit cap pulled low. Face impossible to make out. He glanced around once, then opened my gate with easy familiarity and disappeared inside the yard. My breath caught. 12 minutes later, he reappeared. Same calm walk. Closed the gate. Got back in the car. Drove away. Purnell paused the footage, zoomed on the car. Company logo on the door, he muttered. Can't read it clearly, but looks like Hearth something. Hearthstone, maybe. And the plate, we might get partial numbers. Mrs. Higgins leaned closer. That looks like a real estate car. You know, the kind appraisers drive. Bright writing on the side. Last month, one came to look at my daughter's condo. Same kind of vehicle. The room tilted. An appraiser. At 11 o'clock at night. While I slept, Purnell looked at me. Mrs. Vance, did you or Vernon recently ask anyone to appraise the house? No, I whispered. Never. The house is in my name. Always has been. I never signed anything. He nodded slowly. Then we need to find out who ordered that visit. By noon, we were sitting in the downtown office of Hearthstone Realty. The director, Isaac Graves, 40-ish, expensive suit. Nervous smile, opened a file on his desk. Chestnut Street, 17, he confirmed. Appraisal request came in 2 weeks ago. Client, Vernon Vance. Power of attorney from the owner, Ilara Vance. He slid the document across. I stared at the signature at the bottom. My name. My signature. Except I had never signed it. That's not mine, I said. My voice sounded far away. That's forged. Graves blinked rapidly. But the notary seal is there. Vernon brought it in person. Said his wife was aware, just too busy to come herself. We processed the appraisal. The appraiser went out last night. Client specifically requested evening. Said it needed to be discreet. Discreet, I repeated. Purnell's jaw tightened. Show us the correspondence, everything. Graves turned the monitor. Emails, contract, appraisal report, $420,000. Listing posted that very morning. A buyer already interested. Cash offer. Meeting scheduled in 2 days. 2 days. In 2 days, the house, my parents' house, my house. The only home I had ever truly had would have been sold out from under me. I covered my mouth with both hands. Vernon, my husband of 32 years, had planned to sell everything and disappear with the money. The police station smelled of burnt coffee, old paper, and disinfectant. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything look paler than it really was. I sat on a hard plastic chair in a small interview room while Officer Purnell spoke quietly with the detective, a woman in her late 30s named Reyes, short dark hair, tired but sharp eyes. They had already taken my written statement. Now they were explaining the next steps. "We've put out a pickup order for Vernon," Detective Reyes said. "He's still on the road. But we'll have patrol units watching the depot and the major routes back into town. When he returns, we'll bring him in." I nodded, numb. "Do I have to see him?" My voice sounded small. "No," she answered firmly. "Not unless you want to. You can give your statement again later if needed. But for now, we'll handle the initial questioning. Handwriting expert is already lined up for the forged signature. The notary who supposedly witnessed it, we're pulling records. If it's fake, which it almost certainly is, we've got fraud, forgery, attempted theft by deception, large-scale value. He's looking at real consequences." I stared at my hands folded on the table. 32 years. 32 years of cooking his meals, washing his clothes, waiting for his truck to pull into the driveway. 32 years of believing we were building something together, and he had planned to sell the only thing that had ever truly felt like mine. Gareth walked me to the bus stop when it was over. The sky had turned the bruised purple of late afternoon winter. Snow crunched under our boots. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Most people would have tried to talk it out, make excuses, let it slide. You didn't." "I don't know if I feel strong," I admitted. "I just feel empty." "That's normal. Give it time." The bus ride home was quiet. I leaned my forehead against the cold window and watched the town slide past. Christmas lights still up on some houses, wreaths drooping under fresh snow. People hurrying home with grocery bags. Normal life. Someone else's life. When I stepped into the house, the silence was deafening. No television murmur, no heavy footsteps, no gruff voice asking where dinner was. Just the tick of the clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I didn't cry that night. I was too hollow for tears. I made tea I didn't drink, sat at the kitchen table, stared at the yard. The tracks were softening now, new flakes drifting over them, blurring the edges. Soon they would be gone entirely. But I would remember. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Gareth. "He's back. We picked him up at the depot this morning." My heart lurched. "Does he know I reported him?" "He knows now." Confessed almost immediately. Said he got into debt, slot machines at a truck stop casino. Lost big. Creditors started calling, threatening. He thought selling. The house would fix everything. Said he was going to give you enough to get an apartment, that you'd be fine. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Generous of him. He's asking for a deal. Full confession, cooperation. Probably looking at probation or a short sentence if the judge is lenient. But the house stays yours. The listing's been pulled. The buyer was told the deal is dead. I closed my eyes. "Thank you, Gareth." "You hold on, Alara. Call if you need anything." I didn't sleep that night either. The divorce lawyer's office was small but bright. Plants on the windowsill. Framed certificates, a sense of calm order. The lawyer, a woman named Margaret in her early 60s, listened without interrupting while I told her everything. When I finished, she leaned forward. "You want to file immediately?" "Yes." "Good. The sooner the better. We'll cite irreconcilable differences, but we can also mention the fraud as grounds if you want it on record. Either way, the house is community property in name only. Title is solely in your name, so it's protected. He has no claim." I signed the papers with a hand that no longer shook. Divorce. The word felt foreign in my mouth. A month later, it was final. Vernon moved out while I was at a friend's house. I didn't want to see him pack. When I came home, the closet was half empty. His boots were gone from the hall. His coffee mug no longer sat by the sink. A pale rectangle on the living room wall marked where our wedding photo had hung. I took down the rest of the pictures. Us at the lake in '89. Us smiling stiffly at my parents' anniversary. Us on the porch the year we painted the railing blue. I put them all in a cardboard box and carried it to the attic. Not thrown away. Just set aside. The first weeks were the hardest. The house felt too large, too quiet. I wandered from room to room, not sure what to do with my hands. I kept expecting to hear his key in the lock, his boots on the mat. But he never came back. Spring arrived early that year. By late March, the snow had vanished almost overnight, leaving muddy patches and the sharp green smell of thawing earth. I stood at the kitchen, Window with coffee in my hands and looked at the yard, where those tracks had once been. Now there was only grass beginning to wake, the rose bushes showing tiny red buds, the apple trees stretching bare branches toward the sun. I didn't cry for Vernon anymore. I cried for myself, for the years I had spent shrinking to fit around him, for the dreams I had postponed, for the woman I had forgotten how to be. But the tears didn't last long. One morning in early April, I opened the newspaper and saw an ad. Part-time assistant needed at the public library. No degree required. Must love books. I applied the same day. The interview was gentle. The director, a soft-spoken woman named Lena, asked if I read a lot. Every night for 30 years, I told her. She smiled. That's more qualification than most people bring. I started the following Monday. The library smelled of old paper and polished wood. High ceilings, tall shelves, sunlight slanting through tall windows. I shelved returns, helped children find picture books, recommended mysteries to grandmothers, listened to retirees talk about history. It was quiet work, honest work, my work. I began to meet people. Vivian, 71, widowed, sharp tongue and warm heart, came every Tuesday for romance novels. One day she lingered at the counter. You're the one Maria Higgins told me about, the husband who tried to sell the house. I tensed. Yes. She put a hand on my arm. Good for you for not taking it lying down. I stayed with mine 32 years. Drank, gambled, raised his voice more than once. I told myself it was for the children. Then he died of liver failure, and I discovered I could breathe again. You're 58, not 88. Plenty of life left. Her words stayed with me. I started going out. A group of women, Vivian, Lucille, Tammy, Zora, invited me to a concert at the community center. 70s and 80s songs. We sang along, laughed at the memories, drank cheap wine afterward in a little cafe. They all had stories. Lost husbands, lost dreams, second chances. They made me feel less alone. One evening in May, I sat on the porch with tea, watching fireflies rise from the grass. Mrs. Higgins walked over. Remember that old lady? She asked. The one who told you not to touch the snow? How could I forget? I asked around. No one knows her. Candace at the store said she came in once and never again. I smiled faintly. Maybe she was just passing through. Or maybe, Mrs. Higgins said softly, she was sent. I looked up at the sky. Stars were beginning to appear. Maybe. I took a drawing class. My hands were clumsy at first, lines crooked, shapes lopsided. But I kept going. By the end of May, I had finished a small, still life, apples in a blue bowl. I hung it in the kitchen and felt something warm bloom in my chest. I signed up for French lessons at the Adult Education Center. I bought new rose bushes for the garden. I planned a weekend trip to the state capital. Just me, a small suitcase and no schedule. Life became mine again. Not perfect, not without loneliness, but mine. Some nights I still thought of Vernon. Not with love, not with hate anymore either. Just a quiet sadness for what might have been if he had chosen differently. But mostly I thought of the old woman. Her piercing eyes, her strong grip, her impossible warning. Do not touch the snow. If I had shoveled that night, everything would have been erased. I would have gone on living in a lie, cooking, cleaning, waiting, until one day Vernon came home and told me we had to move. Or maybe he wouldn't have told me at all. Maybe he would have simply vanished with a check in his pocket. Because of her, I saw the truth in time. I never found out who she was. I never saw her again. But every spring when the snow melts and the garden wakes, I think of her, and I whisper thank you. Thank you for the warning. Thank you for the truth. Thank you for giving me back my life.